You are listening to Thrival Nutrition Podcast, episode 69. Welcome to the Thrival Nutrition Podcast with me as your host, Lahana Vigliano. We talk all things holistic living, real food nutrition, fitness, herbs, essential oils, and so much more. I'm here to make your holistic lifestyle simple, easy, and fun for you and your family. I am beyond thrilled that you are here. So let's go over and hop over to today's episode. Hi, you guys. Happy Tuesday. I'm sorry this one is actually coming a little bit later than usual. I usually have a podcast up at like 6 a.m. and it's like 10 a.m. right now as I'm recording and putting this on. But we've just had a crazy couple of weeks with just moving and trying to settle down and exploring. We've had like the exploring urge, which is a good thing and a bad thing because it's just been hard trying to get back into work mode. And I had all my podcasts previously, uploaded and scheduled out while we moved. So I always had a podcast episode coming out for you guys, even though, I was just on the road and unpacking and all that stuff. So now it's just trying to get back in the groove, which I'm sure you understand. And you've had this time before in your life, whether it was a big move or just a big change that's happening. But we've been doing really great. I actually have a little bit of cold right now, so my voice is a little off. I'm feeling much better today, but it lasted 2 days. I would say a good 2 days of really feeling like crummy, but I definitely think it was the move and just all the stress really catching up to us because we were feeling great, but I could not sleep that well during the move, even before we left. It was just like I was anxious. I'm just like you. I'm a normal human, even if I eat good, of just the anxiety of something new and moving like across the country. So if you're new here, we just moved from Florida all the way to Austin, Texas. So it was quite the move, such a long drive. But even when we stopped overnight and things like that, it was intense. I couldn't sleep. I was waking up at 4 a.m. ready to go because my mind was just like, there's so much to do. You cannot sleep. You have to keep going. So so that was just how my life is. And so finally, getting back on a good night's sleep and still doing all these errands of going to the DMV and getting your cars registered. Like, it's just crazy. You really don't understand how much there is to do until you actually do a big move like this. And it's not for the faint-hearted, that's for sure. If you haven't seen, we are trying to really put an emphasis on videos and start our YouTube, which is exciting. It's been so fun. I mean, obviously we have our podcast coming on there as well now. You'll see when I tried to do YouTube a long time ago, I think I uploaded episodes 1 to 12, and then I don't know, I just kind of forgot about YouTube. And then now you'll see I started uploading, I think from maybe episode 60. So now I'm doing it every week, but we're also doing vlogs, kind of behind the scenes, which is really, really fun. We kind of started wanting to do it for our friends and family back home so they can kind of still be up to date with our life, what we're doing. But then I'm like, so many people, when they are connecting with me, whether it's listening to my podcast or read my blog, it's always nice to know the person itself, right? And so I think the best way was to start vlogging. And so you guys can see my life, not as just what I eat, but also as a mom and as an entrepreneur, the business stuff behind the scenes, which is, again, crazy insane until you're actually into it. And I've been getting a lot of good feedback, and you guys are the sweetest. But I think it's really awesome to see, me and my husband's dynamic. We're weird together. So we are super excited. So if you haven't found us on YouTube, it'll be in the show notes too. The link, you can go find us and subscribe. And we've been using the GoPro for it, but we actually just bought a stabilizer for it. And it's awesome because one of the videos I uploaded was my son's perspective on one of our hikes. And all I could hear was the crunching, not the crunching. It's kind of when you move your hand on the camera and it's just a little bit of fuzzy audio. And it was the camera was just shaking, and I'm like, we have got to invest in a stabilizer. This is not happening. So it's an easier viewing experience for you. So we're excited to use it. we're going to be having some awesome footage. And we tested it out yesterday, and it literally looked like my husband was running after my son kicking a soccer ball, as my son was kicking a soccer ball. And it literally looked like a drone was following him. It was legitimately awesome. I was like, this is the best investment ever. So if you guys have been wanting to vlog, or even just not even just putting it out in the world, maybe just for yourself, it really is awesome. The GoPro and the Karma, which is like the little stabilizer grip. It's an investment for sure, but I'm going to be so old one day, and I'm gonna love looking back at these videos. So in the news, I wanted to talk about this with you guys because I've seen a lot of people message me or tag me in it, and it's those stupid coconut oil articles that are going around USA Today. I mean, HuffPost, I think almost everyone has written about it. And nothing boils my blood of seeing like all the bad information and advice that's going around. I'm not even joking. I just got so fed up with it. I was like, are you serious? I saw one article that I reposted on my personal Facebook, but it was like, why you should eat margarine instead of butter. And I was like, gone, done. I literally couldn't even understand how someone could recommend margarine versus butter. It just blew my mind. And so I want to talk to you guys about that today. Put some ease at mine. You guys, I've known that coconut oil has saturated fats. I've known that it was mostly saturated fats, and I've been using coconut oil, recommending coconut oil for ever since I started in my nutrition business, which has been a couple years now. I knew that. Before the study was even done, I knew that it was full of saturated fat. Nothing is new. This is literally stuff they covered back in the 90s when they were recommending, low fat and watching your saturated fat intake. And I personally have had my blood done. I do my routine blood work. I'm super anal about this stuff. I love knowing my body and what's going on and staying up to date. So my cholesterol, my blood work has been awesome. And my doctor even said last year, I probably have to do mine now. It's probably time for it. But last year, she's like, this is the best blood work I've ever seen. And I do coconut oil every day. And it's not the only oil I use. And that's another thing that I want to talk about is like, it's not the only oil you should be using. It's not the end all be all. I know some people are coconut crazy fans and they use it for everything from like beauty to food to everything. And not saying that it doesn't work for beauty. It's great. But for cooking, don't just use coconut oil. This is common sense, guys. You don't just want to use one thing. It's always between a balance of everything. And so not just using coconut oil, we use avocado oil, we use olive oil. Honestly, those are actually my 3 oils that I use, but I use butter too for cooking. And it's using just an array of them. I mean, just don't, eat a whole jar of coconut oil in a day. But saturated fat has been debunked of causing heart disease, and I'm going to get into that too. But just think about it as, eating a variety of oils or fats in your diet, not just focusing on coconut oil. It just blows my mind that the thing that I think that just makes me so mad is that people that aren't educated, or even people that maybe that religiously listen to the American Heart Association and other different government health organizations, they're going to fall for that, and they're going to immediately take that out of their diet and think it's so bad, and now watch your saturated fat intake and not eat nourishing foods like red meat when coming from a grass-fed organic cow is completely different than eating fat from a factory farmed cow, which has more inflammatory properties coming from eating grain and things, versus a cow that's raised on a pasture and that is treated humanely and eats grass and doesn't get antibiotics and hormones and all that stuff. Those are 2 completely different creatures. And so someone would stop now eating, watching their saturated fat intake and stop eating nourishing foods like that, for butter, for an example, that it's just giving people the wrong information and putting in fear where there doesn't need to be fear. You guys, I've known that coconut oil has had tons of saturated fat in it. I know that. And that's never bothered me before. But now it's just affecting people that, obviously don't know as much as I do, which is fine. I went to school for this. I live, learn, and breathe this stuff. It just infuriates me because it's just putting fear. And some of the articles are just completely unnecessary. I'm not even kidding. Like, they literally act like you're going to die if you have coconut oil one more day. Like, come on. So let's kind of get into saturated fats itself, because that's what they say, increases, the bad cholesterol and things like that. Okay. So let's kind of get into that, how this all started. There's other things, but one of the main things that happened that, saturated fat is so bad is a study that was done by Ansel Keys. And he pretty much said like saturated fats was linked to heart disease. And really, he cherry picked the 7 countries that supported that theory and completely forgot about the other 20 that didn't support that theory. So, kind of ever since then, it's always been like saturated fats are bad, and it's really stuck around. So the whole reason I started Thriving Nutrition was to break this dogma in our diet and to really just bring back, our ancestral roots of what, real food, what our ancestors used to eat. And people have been eating butter for a very long time. They've been doing dairy products, not the dairy products we use today. That's very different. Again, from like comparing factory farm to, grass fed, the dairy today is not like the dairy it used to be. But fatty meats, different coconut products, like heart disease wasn't always as high as it is today, which is another thing I want to mention. The American Heart Association obviously gives really good advice because, heart disease is still at an all-time high. So, obviously their advice is really working for you. So what they want to do, and what you'll see in these articles, is that they recommend industrialized, processed vegetable oils over these natural fats from like butter. That's just crazy to me, because in a study in the Lancet, there was actually 3 groups of men that were studied. One was high carb, the other was high protein, the other was high fat. And so out of all those diets, the one that lost the most weight was the fat. And another thing that is really popular still in nutrition is the calories. The high fat had the most calories, but people were losing weight. Again, the whole calories in, calories out, it's so debunked. It's really the foods you eat and, how we support ourselves. And it's so funny that there are different cultures around the world, like in Arctic and Kenya and New Zealand, that eat so many saturated fats through like the fatty meats and, dairy products, and they have no heart disease there. And that shows because obviously there's not processed stuff. There's not the sugary processed things that are in like our culture and our community, but shows that like, how can they eat all the saturated fat and have no, their heart disease is virtually non-existent. And then we try to watch our saturated fat, but we're still have heart disease. I'm scratching my head. It's very interesting. So what is this whole like saturated fat, increases the LDL, which is known as quote unquote the bad cholesterol. And you'll see in these articles, just a blanket statement. And I think that's also what's really annoying, is that there's so much more to the story than what these articles are leading on, that it's just driving me crazy because it puts that fear factor in people. So LDL can be different sizes. It can be very small to medium to large, okay? And so the small size of LDL is actually known to be more studied to linking towards heart disease because they're smaller, so they can absorb into the artery, versus a larger LDL, which kind of bounces on by. It's harder to be absorbed into the artery to create that plaque, right? And so that's the thing, is that your total LDL from just, routine blood work, you won't be able to know what size your LDL is. You have to get an additional test. But so studying those patients with, eating saturated fat and they have increase of LDL, that doesn't mean anything to me. That doesn't tell me about the size. That doesn't mean anything of linking it to heart disease or cardiovascular problems. But did you know what does control the smaller LDLs is carbohydrates? And a study that was shown in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition showed that carbohydrates should not replace saturated fats, because refined carbohydrates are linked to lowering your HDL, your quote unquote healthy cholesterol, insulin resistance, increased small LDL, increased triglycerides. So that's another thing is like outside of fat, like why is the government recommending like 60% of our diet should be like from carbohydrates and whole grains? Blows my mind. So like I said, the small LDL can be easily absorbed versus the larger one. And there was actually a study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition that showed saturated fats helped the small LDL turn larger so it wouldn't get absorbed into artery walls. That's a pretty cool thing. So saturated fats are just really essential for our body. They help the liver in dumping fat cells, which is huge to, get rid of middle body fat storage. Saturated fats are very stable for storing and cooking in high heat. So the problem is that they're recommending, to cook with vegetable oils, but they're not saying how vegetable oils, because they're polyunsaturated fats, can easily oxidize and actually become carcinogenic if they're heated to a certain temperature, which is a reason why olive oil, which is mainly monounsaturated fats, olive oil really shouldn't be used for cooking as much. Olive oil is really great for like raw, like on top of salads and things like that. Not really using olive oil for cooking. You kind of want more of that stabilization in coconut oil or butter or avocado oil versus what they're recommending, vegetable oils. That makes no sense. So again, they're just giving this little tiny part of the picture, and they're not telling you that, oh yeah, if you cook with this vegetable oil, if you heat it up above 350, it's going to oxidize. It's just oxidize, creating free radicals in your body, which is not a good thing. If you hear my daughter a little bit in the background, by the way, she is playing with her toys right now. But just fat in general is something that needs to be in our diet. So obviously, we're not really talking about the low-fat diet. Fat is needed. Fat's needed to help absorb certain vitamins, minerals, vitamins A, D, E, and K. These are all fat-soluble vitamins. So without fat, they're not able to be absorbed and used within the body. But saturated fats, specifically, they build the cell membranes, the sheaths around the nerves. They raise healthy cholesterol too. And, just fat in general provides satiety. And so that's why sometimes if you eat a bowl of cereal for breakfast, you're hungry in a couple hours. Well, if you have a good protein fat breakfast, eggs and whatever else you want to eat that's protein and fat, you'll actually feel more satiated longer than versus if you had just tons of carbohydrates. But going back to kind of saturated fats, there was just a huge review in a study that studied close to 350,000 people, and it clearly showed that saturated fats do not have links to cardiovascular disease. The American Journal of Clinical Nutrition also had a study that showed that there was no links to strokes either. And then there was another study in the British Medical Journal showing that saturated fats are not associated with all-cause mortality, cardiovascular disease, strokes, diabetes too. Trans fat did show this association, which trans fats are in margarine. So it's funny. So like I said, using more of a diverse coconut oil, avocado oil, olive oil, flaxseed oil should definitely be used raw, not cooked with. But you don't want to use soy and corn and peanut and canola and vegetable oil and sunflower oil and safflower oil. Get out of here. Those are highly processed, industrialized oils. They're cheap to make, which is why, most people use them in restaurants and things like that. But these all are, most of those vegetable oils outside of the fats, they have a more omega-6 to omega-3. So their ratio is completely omega-6 high, omega-3 low, which can be inflammatory to us. So outside of the scientific literature, which you can find all these studies in the article that I'm going to post in the show notes, let's take a step back and just, what did our great-great-great-great-grandparents do? What did they eat? They ate real whole foods that were diverse from animals and plants. And I love having the science to back things up, especially in our culture nowadays, but you don't need that. You really just gotta listen to your body, trust real food, let nature just do its thing, and just don't fear the fat, and ultimately do not fear the saturated fat, please. So that's kind of my take on all these articles going around. If you know someone that's freaking out about the coconut oil, please share this with them, because this is so important. And to not fear it, get diverse with the fats you use, but you will not die if you have coconut oil tomorrow, okay? And if you haven't joined our Facebook group yet, please do. That will also be in the show notes. All these links that I'm talking about will be in the show notes. Go check it out. But we would really, really love to have you there. We just passed 200 members, which is awesome. I know I have so many more podcast listeners than that. So you guys need to go join it, and put it as like you can shortcut different groups on the side of your Facebook. Make it one of your main Facebook groups. Seriously, like if you have questions, go ask them, or whatever that you are dealing with in your life, any expertise you have, because we all have it with our health, maybe from personal experience or maybe just from what you've learned. Share it with us. Like, it's just a place to be a community and a safe place too. So any bullies are just banned. I'm not going to have it, but I want it to be a safe place for us to connect outside of, just one-sided of me talking to you on the podcast. Okay. So I hope you guys have a wonderful week. And I will see you next week with Dr. Megan Ding. I'm talking about natural cancer support. It's really, really awesome. So go check that out. Make sure you subscribe. We are actually on iTunes, obviously the website too, but iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play Music, and YouTube too. So it's awesome. Go find me on the social media platforms, and I'll see you next week. The contents of this podcast are for educational purposes only. This information is not intended to replace a one-on-one relationship with a qualified healthcare professional, and it is not intended for medical advice. This is the sharing of knowledge and information from education, research, and experience. I am not a registered dietitian or physician. I encourage you to make your own healthcare decisions based on your research and partnership with a healthcare professional. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next week.